Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. Well, what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to a special edition of the Student Housing Insight podcast. We're doing things live today. A little bit of background on that in just a second. But hey, if you're out in the live audience and you can let me know in the comments that you can hear me, that would be fantastic. Also, just want to encourage everybody. Hey, let us know where you're watching from. Would love to see where folks are coming from. We've got Gene Robbins from Fort Collins and Cole from Clemson. How's it going, Cole? April from Atlanta. And also I want to bring up my co-host today, Davan. How are you doing?
I'm good, Wes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm a little nervous right now because this is the first time I've ever done I've done plenty of live podcasts on site and stuff like that. But this is the first time I've ever streamed something like this. I'm a little, you'd think after all the shop talks that both you and I have done, this would just be kind of old news. But anyway, thanks for being my co-host today on this. We're talking about all things marketing. And a little bit of the background on that I'll give in a second. But for anybody else that may not know who you are in our audience, can you give us a quick intro?
Of course. Well, I need you to not be nervous because you're guiding my feelings. So if you're nervous, I don't know how you expect me to feel. But no, I'm super excited to get to do this with you today. For those that don't know me, my name is Davan Schaly Brumbaugh. I am the Director of Leasing and Marketing for Tailwind Group. They're based in Mankato, Minnesota. We have about 17,000 student beds, primarily concentrated in the Midwest and then the South. I am based in the great state of Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm super excited to get to do this with you today. As you mentioned, I've done a couple of the shop talks with you as well. And when it comes to all things marketing, I'm ready to get in the discussion and chat through because it's so creative. It's so much fun. There's so many different angles you can take. There's all the strategy behind it. So I think this is going to be a fun one today.
Yeah, I think so. And the genesis for this kind of came from our shop talk last week on the 14th, where the next guest I'll bring up, Sarah and Kristen, were on our pre-leasing panel. And during the prelim call, we started talking about there's some really cool things that Core Spaces is doing. And I kind of joked a little bit with Sarah about my weekend activity has now, to look at Dan Goldberg's LinkedIn to see what kind of party they've thrown at one of their properties, because they've really gone over the top. We'll talk more about that in just a second when we bring Sarah on. But that got the marketing conversation going. And something that we picked out, or that I picked out on it, was things are getting a lot more tactical than what they've been over the past couple of academic cycles. Because we got really heavy on all of this, pandemic, atmosphere of, doing, virtual tours and things like that. Not doing the housing fairs, and that doesn't seem to be sticking any longer, which I think everybody was thinking, hey, this was kind of the jolt that we needed to finally get a lot of this technology, into everybody's hands. And I think Gen Z is pushing back a little bit on it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I feel like we went through a really interesting time through COVID where you did have to find ways to reach students digitally, and you had to find a way to source that traffic, by going out and getting people through social media and stuff like that, as opposed to your campus marketing and your events. But I have also seen a shift over the last couple of leasing cycles where people are getting back out face to face because everybody's looking for that personal connection and for that authenticity, which is super important. But kind of like you said, it's way more tactical. There's a lot more thought that goes behind those efforts, whether it's outreach marketing or events or partnerships. And I would say because we've made this shift backwards, like back to kind of what we've seen pre-COVID and even kind of built on top of that, there is a strong need to be able to prove out ROI for those efforts too. So I know that's something that you and I exchanged a few emails about where, we have to be able to very clearly show the results of those things, because during COVID, a lot of the digital efforts, those things can be tracked with clicks and impressions and, being able to track the lead to lease cycle depending upon what your technology looks like. So I would say the biggest shift that I've seen is, yes, we're going back and we're putting a huge focus on partnerships, getting in person, being very strategic, awareness wherever we can in all of the markets that we operate. But there is even more of a call for show us the return for the efforts that we're making. And so each effort has to be very methodical in the planning and execution.
Yeah, I've definitely got some questions on that. Hey, before I bring Sarah and Kristen up, to everybody in our live audience, look, this is a discussion. We wanted to do this because, we wanted to invite the student housing professionals that follow what we're doing here and follow these discussions. We want to invite you guys into the discussion. So over in the right-hand side of your screen, there's an area for comments. Make sure that if there's any, things you want to add in or questions that you've got for the panel, put that there. I will say, make sure that you put a Q in front of any actual questions that you have so that I can pinpoint those out. And if anybody's brave enough, we can also bring you onto the live stage to ask those questions. So with that being said, let me just go ahead and bring Sarah and Kristen. Hello, ladies.
Hi.
How is your Tuesday morning going so far?
Going. It's gray, so that's kind of sad, but
it's rainy and cold, but it's my daughter's 14th birthday, so it's a good day.
Happy birthday.
Well, hey, for folks that may not have watched ShopTalk on a Thursday of last week, they may not know who Kristen and Sarah are. So you guys just introduce yourself really quick and tell us a little bit about the portfolio at that both of you guys are overseeing.
Sure, I'll go first. So like I said, my name is Kristen Gibson. I currently serve as a senior director for Greystar. At Greystar, we do manage and own across 78 different universities, about 139 properties, 80,000 beds. I, every day, get the pleasure of leading a team of senior directors, and regional property managers in our operations group in about 29 different markets, with the biggest concentration in the mid and southwest. But I am based in Athens, Georgia. And after this weekend, I can say, go Dogs.
That was a good game.
It was.
My name is Sarah Maxson. I am a senior manager of sales for Core Spaces. I focus mostly on our stabilizing assets and our operational assets. Currently, Core has 58 properties and just shy of 40,000 beds. So we're growing quick. And my function is to oversee all of our operational and stabilizing assets and assist with sales, marketing, leasing efforts. It's an exciting time at Core with our new sales vertical. We're excited to continue to grow and expand in all things. So happy to be here.
Well, thanks for giving up 2 days this week to helping me out, or 2 days in the past 7 days. So let me get to really quick just to that question that I didn't get to ask last week. And that's this: now that the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, are you having to change any of your marketing and leasing strategies as well as spend? Who wants to take the first stab at it?
I don't mind.
I don't care. Okay.
Okay.
I think a little bit yes, and a little bit no. I think that some of the things we learned from the pandemic era was that there are effective ways to target students remotely. So I think that actually forced a lot of operators and owners into thinking about leasing and marketing a different way, which led to things like the virtual tours, which led to an improvement in the way that we use like Matterport or digital advertising in general. So I do think that helped step everyone's game up from a digital perspective. But then also we're seeing this return to students wanting to physically see a space prior to them making their decision. So what we're seeing in Gen Z specifically is Gen Z will do a lot of research on the properties they're interested in on social media, and then they'll kind of make a list of properties they want to go visit physically from their social media research. So you're kind of seeing this twofold of we need to ensure that our social media content is above standard and like exceptional and phenomenal at all times because they're looking at that.
Let me stop you on that because it was I was expecting you to say doing a search on Google, but you said social media, and so I want to dig into that for a second. Is it really more social media than it is any kind of search engine? And two, when it comes to social media, what is with the landscape with TikTok, and I've been getting everybody that's done with X, now going to Blue Sky or whatever it is. Talk about that landscape just a little bit as to what your social media or property social media really needs to look like, and what channels do you have to be involved with in order to get in front of students?
Yeah, I think for us at Core, it's a lot of Instagram. So we have a very heavy emphasis on the lifestyle that we're promoting on Instagram. Gen Z is primarily Instagram users. We don't currently house TikTok at Core. We use Reels instead. It's essentially the same thing, but then that way we can keep all of our content on a singular channel, which I think is really important. So what we're finding is a lot of students kind of hear about us, or maybe they do a Google search, but they're not spending a ton of time on the website. Like they do general research, they look at photographs on the website, but then what they're doing is they're going to our social media and they're looking at the lifestyle content that we're producing. We actually have a phenomenal marketing team at Core Spaces, and that Lee Bryce video that you pulled up on ShopTalk last week was created by Megan O'Rourke and the team over at Core Spaces, and they did just a stellar job at it. And that's the kind of content that we are specifically focusing on. So we're moving away from the, take the picture of the Tour to Win winner, or take a picture of your event that you hosted in your clubhouse. And we're focusing more on, here's the student base. Here's a picture of a regular student that's one of our, wonderful residents, and here's them in their natural habitat doing what they do on property. And it's more about capturing the day-to-day life, but in a really aesthetic way. So we're looking at a lot of influencers and the kind of content they're capturing, because when we can mirror that content and we can make our content look like the influencer's content, then we become the influencer. So that's what we're doing over at Core. And I have to just say it again, Megan O'Rourke and Mike Erickson are just such great creative minds that we've really produced some phenomenal Instagram pages, especially for our new developments this year. We're really I'm impressed. I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pages on Instagram, and the content here has just been fantastic.
So while I want to throw that question off to the other two ladies, but if you don't mind, because I'm bringing up the stuff on LinkedIn, but if you could bring up the stuff on, some of your favorite stuff on Instagram, I'd like to be able to share that with folks. But Kristen, I do want to come back to this post-pandemic question, but to you and Davan really quick on the social media. What is,
Yeah, I mean,
what are you guys seeing?
Sarah hit the nail on the head. I mean, Google's never going away because we have parents, right? So parents are going to search and find their information differently. And that space is just so competitive from a spend standpoint and that kind of thing. But the social media, it's funny that Sarah mentioned the new devs, because I tell my teams all the time, if you're struggling with content, go find a new development and follow them, because generally the time that they're investing into their content is just phenomenal. But I think the other piece is like that we focus on a lot is, I keep coming back to the word of activation. Like I think about our Union on 24th project where there's so many spaces. How are you activating the space and then bringing it out, into the world for people before they come and tour? A tour at Union on 24th takes 45 minutes and you don't even see every space because the building's so big. So looking at ways that I think is really cool, like they do these like pop-up markets that are so popular right now that are, similar to a, farmer's market, but bring the pop-up market into your lobby. And then how do you go out and activate that into the space to bring people back? So Sarah's exactly right. People want to know what it feels like to live at X property based off what your real looks like. They don't want to walk in and think, oh, well, that was a photoshopped image and this isn't what it looks like when I walk in the door. So using your real residents, your real people, and just making sure you have very authentic feedback. But man, the new developments do a great job. So for anybody on the call, and follow your competitors, follow Core Properties, follow Tailwind Properties. See what others are doing in the space. But it just kind of gives you a more holistic approach. But social media is not going away. That's for sure.
Yeah, Davan, are you seeing a lot of students turn into traffic because of social media versus just Google searches and rankings?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit at LeaseCon last year. Social media is kind of shift into being almost more of its own Gen Z search engine. I think that's really how you have to think about it when you're strategizing what you're going to do with your content, where you want to position yourself. I would agree with a lot of the things that Sarah and Kristen already said. There has been a huge shift in terms of what sort of content we're putting out there, just putting up the photos of your amenities or like a quick photo of somebody that you met on campus while you were outreach marketing, holding up a goodie bag. Like that just doesn't cut it anymore. What our social media manager encourages our properties to do is to search the locations and then reach out to residents like, hey, I saw you posted this photo before you went out on a Saturday night, like on your balcony or this or that. Could we use that photo for social media? Because you are a resident. And obviously they get really excited because their content is going, on other accounts and being kind of further pushed out into the space. But I also think that it opens up a dialogue then of how can you work together? One of our properties in Mankato, Minnesota actually partnered up with a resident and they did a day in the life video of like, watch me get ready to go attend, a college town resident event. And that was just a really cool other side of the experience that I also think helped encourage residents of like, oh, so this is what it looks like when they send out the emails about coming to X event. So I think, yes, everything they've said is correct. We have to think about social media more as a search engine for our target demographic. We have to use photos from our residents, specifically if you can use content that they've already posted and they give you permission to use it. And I also think that that's going to open up a dialogue of what sort of partnership opportunities that you have. And, you can go the influencer route where you have them take pictures at the pool or the amenities or that sort of stuff. But I actually think the video content, kind of like what I was already talking about, where it's like, let me take you behind the scenes of what a property's resident event looks like. That is just an angle that a lot of followers will have never seen before. It will help encourage your residents to attend events, which I know, the in-person experience is something that we want to spend a lot of time talking about today. So I would agree and happy to kind of share some examples of stuff that's worked really well for us, I'd say in the last probably 2 cycles.
Yeah, let's part that for just a second. I want to get back to this post-pandemic question and get Kristen's thoughts on it. Go for it.
I mean, I think it just goes back to, like we said, we're seeing more in-person tours. They're starting with the social media platforms. What is it going to feel like? And then they're coming in and they want to feel the experience. So like what we talk about a lot is you walk into a Four Seasons, you know it's a Four Seasons, right? Or you walk into a JW Marriott, you can probably close your eyes and know that that's the brand hotel you're in. So that's what we're really focusing on. And it starts with the social media content, right? What they see online, they want to see when they walk in the door. But, you know, how are they being greeted? How does the property look? How does it smell? What's the level of service? You know, the attention to detail. That's really what we're focusing on, because, you know, 2 years ago, coming out of the pandemic, you could probably land on, well, my buddy lived here, or my friend lived here, or my mom already looked online and said, this is where and those practices are just gone. And that's not enough. Not to say it's not important. People want to know that somebody lived there and had a good experience, but that's not driving the entire buying decision anymore. So it's less about, you know, the occasional free t-shirt, or like Davan mentioned, the goodie bag. I mean, those are fun and they all have a place, but that's not driving a buying decision anymore. So, you know, we're just spending a lot of time talking about that hospitality approach and how are we layering that into the experience from day one when they walk in and take the tour, all the way to when they pick up their keys and move in, and continue through the whole living experience, right? There's nothing worse than somebody makes a buying decision. They feel like, oh, well, they've moved on to the next leasing cycle because they're focused on leasing. They're not worried about my experience. So how are we taking that hospitality approach through the entire, you know, life cycle of that resident? And really, you know, for Greystar specifically, we have a huge conventional and active adult business, right? So how are we taking that lifestyle and experience, starting at the student, and hopefully making those people a Greystar customer for life? So I think you're just seeing a lot more of a service, hospitality driven versus just a, hey, my buddy lived here and the pictures look good online, so I'll sign a lease.
Are you guys you know, we've got a lot of companies in the industry now that are, you know, partnering up with, or excuse me, not partnering up, but that are growing their conventional portfolio. And I think that's great. I think there was a day. Please, no one take offense to this. I didn't recruit from conventional. It's
different.
It's different. It's much easier to get what you need from the hospitality industry. But there was this thing of, hey, you know, can we convert? There's two questions that I'm going to pose here. One, both of you guys have, you know, national brands, and probably more so for Hub, well, specifically for Core, and how they brand their properties, and Tailwind as well. There's always been some kind of question out there as to, could that branding help going from, you know, one market to another market? Someone went to, you know, the Hub at Knoxville, and would they go to the Hub at, you know, whatever market, or with their brother or sister or cousin or whatever, pick up on that because it was a brand that, you know, that former family member or whatever was at. I want to ask if you guys are seeing that. Then also, if you've got that, obviously Core has got BTR, but as far as that conventional portfolio that's there as well, are you seeing transitions happen from, well, I was at a Greystar property when I was in school, I want to look for a Greystar property when I moved to Atlanta to take on my first job or whatever? Any thoughts from you guys on that?
I'll just tackle kind of the brand question first. And Sarah, if you want to jump in on this, because I know you guys kind of have a similar setup to what we do. I love that you asked this question. So we have 4 core brands, and then depending upon kind of the asset where it's positioned in the market will determine a lot of which brand category it falls in. And I have seen it happen a few times. And I think the situations in which it's like, you know, I lived at a Quarters property in Ames, Iowa. There's a Quarters property in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I think they don't happen as often as you would like, but when they do happen, it's super rewarding and really cool. The 2 examples that I've seen is, you know, potentially somebody, I'll just keep with the example I just had. Maybe they lived at, the Quarters Ames at Iowa State in their undergrad, and then maybe they're going to Oklahoma State for grad school. They start doing their search. They see, that same recognizable name. We've seen it happen like that. And then the other way that I've seen it happen is when you have parents that have, multiple students going to college. And I think that's why it's super important that you have to think about the guarantors as much as like customers as the students themselves. I feel like a lot of times I've seen people kind of just shirk off the guarantor. It's, that's a, financial guarantee, and that's kind of where it stops. And it's like, well, sometimes you're reaching out to them, because that the renewal potential hinges on it or something like that. But it's like, you really have to think of them as much as a customer as the resident, because they may have, 2-3 younger siblings, 2-3 other kids that are going to be going to school potentially at the same university. I think you can see it happen there. Well, my brother or sister lived here. My parents really liked it. They wanted me to live here. Or, maybe their student went to school, their oldest went to school in Bloomington, Indiana at a Quarters, and now maybe they're going to end up in, Oxford, Mississippi at a Quarters. So I have seen it happen where when you have those national brands, they will have that reputation and they can be recognized in multiple different markets across the country. It's very rewarding when it happens. I would love to see it happen more, but I think that you have to think about, kind of like what Kristen was talking about, even still, if you don't have a conventional arm, how can we make these residents for life for longer periods of time than just their undergrad? And I think that you have to think about guarantors as much as a customer as the student. If you want to leverage those opportunities where maybe they have multiple students that will be pursuing, a bachelor's degree or master's degree or something like that. So I have seen it happen. Super cool, very rewarding, doesn't happen enough. But, and it also, it makes the work that you've put in to build these, very specific brand categories worth it for sure.
Yeah. Sarah, I know you haven't been a core very long, but has anyone talked about?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, especially with the hub, I think that's exactly the vision is no matter where in the country you are, because, a lot of parents have multiple children going into schools. They're not all going to the same school. I think the vision for Core is that no matter where you are in the country, if there's a hub there, exactly the kind of experience you're going to get, the level of customer service, the UX, like top to bottom. I think that's the exact experience. And I think that the hub brand is cool because it's a singular brand, but it's unique to every market. So the buildings aren't these cookie cutter, one size fits all buildings. Core puts a lot of intentionality behind the way it designs these buildings, and it's designed to fit the student customer base it's serving, which I think is really special and unique about Core Spaces. And I've seen I've peeked a little bit behind the curtains about how much thought goes into where the amenities are placed and what is, what's going here and what should the unit mix look like and what kind of decoration should go into it. What's going to make it feel and resonate with the student so that when, mom has 3 daughters going into college over the next 5 years, no matter where they're at, if daughter number 1 goes into a hub building, let's say in Gainesville, Florida, then she can also, if they go to Knoxville, Tennessee, or if they go to Cincinnati, Ohio, no matter where they're at, there's going to be a hub brand, just like a Marriott or a Ritz-Carlton or a Waldorf Astoria. It doesn't matter. It's, what to expect with the hub brand, and you're going to get a stellar experience no matter where you're at. And I think I agree with Devin. I wish it happened more frequently. Although I did have an experience on a plane. I was talking to Jordan on a plane, and he heard the guy sitting next to me heard me mention, like I said, Core or something like that. And he goes, and I got off the phone. He goes, "Oh, Core Spaces?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, my daughter lives at a Core Spaces building." And then the guy in front of him says, "Oh, Core Spaces, my daughter lives at Hub," I forget where it was, like Hub Columbia. Like it was crazy because like literally in 2 rows of a plane, you're hearing all these parents who are like, "Oh yeah, my kid lives at a Core building. Like I recognize that name." So that was like a really cool experience. Just like on a random Tuesday on a plane, you're hearing this kind of stuff. So, but I do wish that it happened more. And I think it will. I think that as more and more operators begin to create these like stabilized brands at these large universities, I do think we're going to see an upward trend in people finding a brand that they're really happy with, just like you do with every hotel. As a traveler, you know, like I'm very loyal to Marriott. Like I'm a Marriott girl through and through.
Yeah.
But I do think you're going to find more and more of that as large operators and developers start to develop these like very core, consistent brands across the country.
So I want to get back onto events before I go to that. Sarah and Devin, if maybe I saw you typing earlier, maybe you were looking up Instagram as well. But you guys have anything from Instagram that you guys wanted to share?
Yeah, I have 3 really quick things. So the very first thing, let's see if I can.
You should have a share screen at the bottom.
Yeah. Also share audio. Oh, okay, great. Okay, perfect. Can you see it?
I will add it to this. It's going to be the whole. There we go. All right.
Got it.
Yep. You should see it on.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So this is Hub Knoxville. And this is kind of like that example we were talking about earlier. I think all 3 of us mentioned how it's important to like share real content from your resident base. So you can see some photo examples of that here, you know, like these girls and, you know, these guys, but then also about just like this aesthetic content that paints a picture that Hub Knoxville is gonna create this lifestyle. And if you live at this building, this is the kind of lifestyle you can aspire to. And again, it's that FOMO feeling. Like we want to create that FOMO feeling. And this is one of those very good examples of how a new development puts a lot of emphasis on its lifestyle creation. And then the second example is in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a big deal with the university. And so we ended up inviting these hockey players. I won't share this, that's kind of loud, but the hockey players actually dressed up in their gear and went into our model unit, and everything. They like hung out in our model unit. Which is really funny. And like they walked around the whole property like this, which I thought was just absolutely hilarious. And they like did a little like funny jokes and all that kind of stuff. And then the last one is I will share. This is what we ended up posting from Lee Bryce. This was our like recap.
This property is huge. It's so big. Are we able to get the audio? All right.
So that's just like, those are just 3 examples of, oops, sorry.
So I want to ask this question
FOMO
to
lifestyle feeling that we're trying to.
I think we got some buffering issues going on with Sarah.
This for themselves, and the way that we do that is through this kind of like lifestyle content creation.
Perfect. So I want to ask this question specifically to the audience. You guys can answer this as well, but are you spending more marketing dollars on events this year? Would really like to see that in the chat for those of you guys that are involved with planning those type of events. Devin, I want to get to you because we talked a little bit previously about a new position that you guys hired for. But I do want to share just really quick, going back to core and some kind of what kicked off this conversation about events. This is Dan Goldberg's, who's the president of Core Spaces. This is his LinkedIn page. This one's from 2 months ago, where we had you guys had Peyton Manning show up for a Barstool Sports event. You want to recap that really quickly?
Sorry, you cut out for just a second. Were you?
Yeah, Sarah, you've got some buffering issues. I'll keep talking here. But then here was the other one from the Lee Bryce event at the Pier in Clemson, which was so funny because I've actually got a call across my my suite here is an accounting firm, and the owner of the accounting firm her son lives at the Pier, and I actually got to hear about this from that perspective as well. So that was pretty cool. But Davan, let me go to you. I mean, obviously they're having some great success with pouring their time and effort and money into some of these bigger type of events. How are you guys approaching events?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit when we were exchanging some emails. So a new initiative that we took on towards the end of last spring and really started to ramp up through the summer to get ready for the fall was we hired for an outreach marketing specialist on our corporate marketing team. So she is only one person and we have 30 plus properties. So it's a lot to kind of bite off for one person, but she's done a fantastic job. And really the thought process behind that position was, most corporate marketing teams that are supporting properties, you have your digital marketers, you have your social media managers, you have your potentially graphic designers or branding experts, people that are going to do photography, videography, but one of the things that constantly is on all of our marketing calendars was pre-COVID, and I feel like is starting to come back, is outreach marketing, events, partnerships. And we realized that we needed somebody with a really narrow focus that could bring a lot of passion and energy to that, because I feel like it's something that properties tend to shy away from because it's like, that fear of rejection, putting myself out there, that kind of stuff. So we really wanted somebody that could travel to the markets, get arm in arm with the properties, show them the ropes, make sure that they understood top to bottom when we're talking about outreach marketing. What are our goals? What are we looking for in terms of performance indicators and return on investment? And she's done a fantastic job. She's traveled to markets where we're struggling with traffic, and she's, driving around looking for event opportunities, partnership opportunities, trying to connect with student organizations. She goes to housing fairs and plans kind of the open house, mixer type event that'll happen after those. When we acquire a property and we rebrand it, she leads our rebrand efforts. We usually throw a brand launch event. We had one in Lawrence, Kansas back in October that I went to that had about 200 and almost 50 attendees, which was really exciting for an on-property event. So yeah, it's been.
Let me ask this question. I mean, before she was in place, how did those things get tackled? Because Tailwind's a growing company, and I think some operators may look at that, especially if there's not a lot of growth, and say, yeah, it would probably be helpful to have somebody that's focused on events. But I mean, let's just kind of go back before you guys had that position. How did that get tackled?
Yeah, I feel like it goes back to everything that we've already talked about of like really trying to create that experience. I think, a lot of times people can fall into the pitfalls of, okay, we're going to set our monthly marketing plans. Okay, we're going to go to campus, or we're going to execute this event, or we're going to do this partnership. And then it's the week of, and it's like, we ran out of time to get the materials. We didn't promote it enough. It's always just kicking the can down the road. And so by having somebody that's willing to be a road warrior, get arm in arm, be really central and focused on, not this event plus leasing, this event plus social media. It's no, just this event. Like this is all that I focus on, and how we can get the max potential out of this particular effort without trying to, also put in the extra pieces of the social media and the leasing and the this and the that, because that's why the can gets kicked down the road. The first thing that gets cut when the day gets busy is we're not going to campus. We may have to cancel that event. We aren't going to do, those walks or, that meeting with that student organization. Those are the first things to go when the day gets busy. So, and I think we've realized that, especially if we want to stay competitive, with Lee Bryce concerts and Peyton Manning type events, is we have to create focus. We have to create accountability. We have to inject energy into something that really, to me, felt like a series of just checking boxes for a really long time. And we have to get in person, because everything that we're talking about doing is in person, and you can't
it's
really
a creative
those things from afar.
It's a creative process. And, from, property management professionals, I don't care if you're on the marketing side or not, there's so much of a system and an MO that your brain has to go into to check all those boxes, that when it comes to, planning a simple event, maybe it's the opening event of the semester or whatever, and thinking about all those details, it's a creative process. And if, you're dealing with all these other distractions, it's hard to ever get in that creative frame of mind.
And she's changed my perspective on so many things. Like I said, she leads our rebrand launch process. So when we acquire a property, usually 60 to 90 days post-close, we're planning the rebrand. When are we officially going to switch over the name, switch out the signage? And we realized that there was a huge identity crisis associated with that. Like, if you just change out the signage one day, you're going to get a million calls from parents and residents. I came home and the place that I live changed names and I don't know what's going on, or if I even still have a lease here. So we're like, we have to use this opportunity to effectively communicate, but also, can we leverage this from a leasing perspective? And, when she got into it and brought all these fresh ideas, she's like, with our landing brands, let's give away, a base luggage set and this and that. And I'm like, who wants a luggage set like at a rebrand? And I was at that event, and a student won it, and it was like he literally had won the lottery. And so I also think not only is it a creative process, but you have to diversify the ideas and points of view that you're getting for those types of things. And so she's really shifted my perspective on what's it going to take in order to create that experience. And she, at one of the events, she was like, let's do like a paper airplane throwing contest. And I'm like, oh, so they're going to throw it and it's literally just going to drop in the grass. And there was an aerospace engineering student that made a paper airplane that literally launched over the DJ booth. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. And that's what people remembered. And it made great social media content, and it was so much fun. And so it is a creative process, but you also have to diversify the points of view in the room to make sure that you're meeting the needs of everybody that's going to engage in that experience.
I don't remember the Lee Bryce concert, but I remember that plane going all the way across.
Yeah, it was fun. It's just, and I think it's a good reminder to like not take it too seriously too. I think we also take these housing fairs and these open houses and this campus market, we take it too seriously. And that shows when we show up and we're trying to execute on those things and set ourselves apart from our competitors. So I think it's a good reminder too, to not take it too seriously and think about how you're showing up when you're trying to execute a lot of these things that we're all trying to get back to doing.
Okay. So going back to that question again, if you're in the audience, I would love to have you guys put in the answer this question in the comments as well. I think everybody's afraid to talk about how much money they're spending, but I mean, obviously that position's there. Is, if you don't want to get into details, don't worry about it. But is that something that, the salary for that person, is that billable back to the properties? Is that something that's on the management fee side? You care to talk about how that's financed at all?
Yeah, I would say that it's, without going into too much detail, we look at it as it's bundled marketing support. So we already provide social media support,
Gotcha.
graphic design support, digital marketing support. It's just another facet of the multifaceted marketing support that we provide from a corporate management perspective. Gotcha. And I think to just like quick kind of answer your question about spending more marketing dollars on events this year, I would say yes. And the other thing that we have created is kind of a tier system 4 events. So it's like, okay, here's the first tier. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's what we can probably anticipate in terms of turnout and return on investment. Can we inject an additional $2,500 or $5,000, in terms of the promotion and execution, and leverage that into additional attendees, which could result in leases? What is it going to give us from a social media perspective? So we've started tiering out our events when we're working with our site teams to plan them, of like, because there's so many directions, there's so many ideas. So it's like, okay, for this particular event or effort that we're making, let's look at it from a tier structure. What do we want to put into it? And what can we kind of assume that we're going to get out of it? And then where can we strategize from a budget perspective?
Gotcha. Kristen.
Yeah.
Does Greystar have anybody focused on events?
We've kind of got a bifurcation of all these responsibilities, right? We have a national marketing team that's kind of managing more of the digital content and the TikTok platforms and all that. We obviously have a sales team that's more regionally focused, and they're going out and they have regions similar to a regional property manager. They go out and they're supporting. So I think, when I was sitting there listening to Davan talk, I'm like, all I can think is like, it's just the person who's maybe into the Google Analytics and likes to drill into all that is not the person you want planning your events, right? So it's about having kind of that bifurcation. And we hear the word marketing and we just think we need a marketing person, but you don't really. You need a salesperson, and you need a digital person, and you need a social media person. And so we just try to focus on really bifurcating those responsibilities across the portfolio. We're not doing Lee Bryce concerts. I think we all know that. But what events look like for a new dev and a lease-up might be different than a stabilized deal. So we definitely have teams that are strategically focused depending on where that asset is. And I think Davan kind of alluded to that. You've got to meet that asset at what their need is. Are they a deal that you're just kind of moving along, or are they a new dev, or are they a recent acquisition that we're having to, now build them up to what is Greystar and that they match a Greystar standard. But yes, we do have several different team members that, depending on what the need is, are out there working for us.
So and let's just, kind of think about the tier 1, Power 5 type markets. Are you seeing more spend on events this year?
I would say we're seeing it's almost a reallocation. Marketing spend's going up, right? The cost of groceries are going up. So obviously marketing spend is going up. Everything's getting more expensive. But I would say we're seeing a lot of a reallocation to how we're spending that money too, and where that focus is. And can you get partnerships? And, kind of going back to what I was talking about before with, space activation and your property activations, using partnerships with small businesses where it's like, hey, we did something called union. They did something called union bucks, and it was union money. So it's like we're kind of putting that back into the business, but then turning around and be able to use that to go out on the street and market. So that business is kind of getting, students coming in and hopefully spending a little bit more money in that business than the union buck. And it's kind of that partnership. So I think partnerships are key, but I just think it is more money. Yes. I don't think anybody on this call would say they're spending less money. I think we're reallocating it and spending it differently.
Yeah. So Sarah, and thinking of those 2 big events, do you guys have any other big events like that planned for this year?
She probably didn't want to tell her secret.
Not for this year. I think, these type of events are really strategic. And I think that what we are doing really well is creating long-term relationships with big names, so that if it's determined an event like that needs to happen, pulling the trigger and pulling the right strings to make that event happen is like what we're setting ourselves up to do. Because a lot of times, quite honestly, Wes, it's not something that gets planned months and months and months and months in advance. It's something that we come very quickly together to do, which again just speaks to like how many hands it takes to make something like that happen.
I can imagine.
The Lee Bryce concert was not something that we planned 6 months ago. This is something that we executed in a very short amount of time. And, we had to look at it from do we have enough time to market it? Do we have enough time to get bodies in the door for tours? How are we going to advertise? How are we going to track the success? There were so many metrics. So I think that it's less about planning these big events in the future and more about setting ourselves up for success, looking at the future markets and saying like, where might we need to pull the trigger on something like that? I don't think it's necessary in every market, right? It's a big dollar spend. And it's something that, you have to go to the investment partners and all that, like the equity partners, and everybody has to get on board. So we have to really make sure that when we go to them with these types of plans, there's a clear path for return on investment. Which means that not every asset is eligible for an event like that.
Sure.
Right? Like
sure. So, yeah, I think look, you guys, I don't want to dig into the financials on it, but but let's talk about, kind of that runway. Obviously it's gotten you guys a good response in both markets this year. And that's obviously paid off. I think, there's going to be continual return of that, at least, through the next cycle, if not the next two cycles, because now you've got folks that are, that are hooked. Maybe they were a freshman or sophomore, and now this is going to, because of that event, this is going to be their home for the next 2 years. Right. It's not just the event. You got to treat them well once they move in, but they've made that initial decision. That's where they're going to live next year. At what point, do you have to come back and say, we got to do something again? Is that,
I think that's,
is that 2 years down the road?
I really think it just depends on the market, right? So we see these as opportunities. If, we have to fill the building to X% to meet pro forma, right? That's our target. We have a target that everyone agrees on. And I think it's like it gives you a chance to get more renewals, which then means you have to do less new leasing, especially in a market like Clemson, where there is new supply. We're in a unique location in Clemson. And if we can get them out there, they typically stay. That's what we know historically about the Clemson market. Once someone moves in somewhere, they typically stay through the remainder of their collegiate experience. So that's why we pulled the trigger. Knoxville, we're bringing on new beds for the next several years in that market. So it's how do you build the hype around the product and then have that FOMO last through the next few development cycles, right? But then again, it gives you the opportunity for more renewals, which means less turnover costs, which helps on the operations side. So that's not a great answer, but like that's kind of how we see it. And so it's one of those things we just have to assess year over year, but it's not a decision we make lightly ever. And so there may not ever be another big, huge event at the pier, right? It's maybe there's more medium-sized events because those are more palatable from a cost perspective, especially if we get the building or the property to its targets and it maintains those targets at a good rate growth. It's not necessary. So there may never be another. The answer may be it's never going to happen again. The answer may be in 5 years, we decide, well, we need to rebuild that FOMO and we do that again. So it's a year by year case study, but it's also understanding how each market that we do something like this in works and what the future of that market looks like. Because the future of Knoxville looks very different than the future of Clemson. And so, maybe Knoxville is not a Peyton Manning size activation, but a smaller one, but it's reinvigorating the market every year that we bring new beds into the market. So it's one of those things we just have to look at the beginning of, a leasing cycle. We decide what went well, what didn't go well, and what are our opportunities.
So I want to come back to this question one more time. Sorry, not that question. About this post-pandemic stuff. We had a lot of focus start to go on, making sure that you've got virtual tours on your website, making sure that there's we've got a lot of companies that are now doing, the self-serve, self-guided, thank you, tours. Is any of that going away? Is that still working well? I don't see a day where you ever take tours off of your off of your website or your social media, posts or anything like that. But, is there, let's talk about the FaceTime tours that a lot of folks were doing, or is that gone away at this point? Is that something that is changing at all?
I mean, that specifically probably has gone away, but I don't remember if it was Davan or Sarah at the beginning that referenced like Matterport and just, those different services that are out there that kind of provide that without me needing to walk around with my iPhone and shows. I think that was survival, right? Like we need to give a FaceTime tour so we're surviving. I think we've moved past that. There's always going to be that technology piece because you're always going to have the student that lives in the other state or the international student that's coming over or the parent that can't get to the property. So none of that's going to go away. It's going to complement. I think it's going to complement. But I think that in person, being at the property, what it feels like is going to start to take its place back where it was, right? I keep saying old school, but that's probably because I've been in the industry longer than the other two. I'm going to make that assumption. But it's going to be a little, old school. But they're just a nice compliment to each other. I think they serve their purpose. They have a spot, and none of them are going away.
Yeah, I think that the biggest, I second that. I think the biggest thing, like I mentioned at the very beginning, is that we've now learned the skills to use to do a FaceTime tour, right? Like there's a lot of owner operators that have full SOPs on how to give a proper FaceTime tour, what the etiquette looks like, all that kind of stuff. So, I think that the pandemic gave us just additional tools in our toolbox to use as closing techniques and methods to get the sale. So I don't think that while it's not at the forefront, I do think it was still a really important, it was an important learning lesson for a lot of operators to become more versatile and agile so that we can serve our customer base no matter where they're at. I know that we still continue to place a big emphasis on distance leasing as we approach like Thanksgiving and winter break. I know that we do a refresher on distance leasing. I've been doing it with my teams on our weekly calls that we have on here's how you engage someone through distance leasing. I know that that's a focus of our sales vertical is creating training protocols on distance leasing. So I think that it has a place. It just has a new name instead of virtual. It's now called distance, right? Because that's really what it's used for. It's used for individuals that are not in town or parents that are not in town that want to take a look. So I think it just has a new name. But it's still there.
Well, Davan, anything else to add to that before we
I was just
here?
going to say, if anybody remembers the days of when you would give a FaceTime tour and you would walk out of the clubhouse and the internet would drop off and then it would freeze and you're just like, how did I get here? And like, why is this where we are in our industry at this time? So now as they were talking, I agree with everything that they said, but I was just thinking about the days of giving those tours. You walk out of the clubhouse and head for the model, internet drops off, everything freezes, it's awkward, and just how frustrating those days used to be. And you're just like, how did we get here?
Right.
Well, ladies, I appreciate it so much. This has been a first for us. We're not only doing this live for folks that registered, but we've also been streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So, and thanks to all the folks that showed up today. And let me know. Did you guys like this kind of format? Is this something that you guys want to see more from Student Housing Insight? Because we definitely want to get this, have these discussions where you can participate. And well, if you had colleagues that were not able to join, this will be on those platforms for sure. And we're going to also even cut the audio out and do a podcast on it. So you can find us wherever you consume podcasts. But make sure that you check out our website, studenthousinginsight.com. Is the website, and we've got all of our content there. You can also go to our events page that will have not only our events that we're doing, but also events that the industry that we're, industry events that we're supporting as well. So speaking of which, Davan, I'll see you at LeaseCon TurnCon in just a couple of weeks.
I'll see you in Charlotte. Can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Thanks so much. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.